Greetings, everyone. Welcome to our July lesson of DBT, Dialectical Behavioral Therapy. This month, we're going to learn about emotion regulation skills. So the first quarter, we went over mindfulness. The second quarter, we went over distress tolerance. Now for this quarter, we're going to learn about emotion regulation. So what is that exactly? You may be wondering. Well, emotion regulation is the ability to control or influence which emotions you have, when you have them, and how you experience and express them. And that comes from the Handbook of Emotion Regulation. So the theoretical idea is that emotional distress is a result of secondary responses, such as intense shame, anxiety, or rage, to primary emotions. Often the primary emotions are adaptive and appropriate to the context. The reduction of this secondary distress, it requires the exposure to the primary emotion in a non-judgmental atmosphere. That non-judgment is so important. I know I've mentioned it many times before, and it's so important here. So there's 4 different goals or modules that the emotion regulation skills are taught in. And I'm going to try to go over a little bit of each one in this month, next month, and the third for this quarter. So the goals or modules, there's 4 of them. One being to understand and name your own emotions. That is so important. Identifying the functions of emotions, their relationship to your difficulties in changing them, understanding the nature of your emotions, learning how to identify and label them in everyday life. So we're going to go over that today. The second goal being decreasing the frequency of unwanted emotions, thus helps you change the unwanted emotions. So that's another goal. There's a few different skills. I'm going to go over one of them that talk about how to change your unwanted emotions. Third goal being decrease emotional vulnerability, which is also saying you're reducing your vulnerability to emotion mind. If you recall in our very first DBT lesson where we talked about wise mind being the goal of any DBT skill, is you have your emotion mind on one side, you have your reason mind or logical mind on the other side. The goal is to always be in the middle, meeting in the middle of the two, and that's where we have our wise mind. And then the fourth goal, decreasing emotional vulnerability or suffering, managing extreme emotions so that you don't make things worse. Reduce suffering when painful emotions overcome you. So those are the 4 goals or modules of emotion regulation skills. So I want to go over that first one right now, understanding, naming your own emotions, and knowing what emotions do for you. That is an important piece of emotion regulation because, yes, oftentimes if we don't feel like we're in control of them, it can be extremely frustrating. Why do we even have emotions? What are they for? Well, emotions motivate us for action. They can motivate our behavior, prepare us for action. That action urge of specific emotions is often hardwired in our biology. They can save time in getting us to act in important situations, especially if we don't have time to think things through, to use our reason mind or logical brain. Sometimes we've got to act much more quickly, and that's what our emotions allow us to do. They do communicate and influence others, whether we intend to or not, or like it or not. Our communication of emotions can influence others, whether it's facial expressions, body language, voice, tone, verbal or nonverbal communication of our emotions. It can influence others as well. And then, of course, emotions communicate to ourselves. Emotional reactions give us important information about a situation. Emotions can be the signals or alarms that something is happening. And I can't tell you how often I've had that gut instinct, that gut feeling. It can be like intuition, but really it's our brain is sending a signal to the gut first before we even realize what's happening. So it's so important to at least check in with that and be mindful of that, because we can assume sometimes that our emotions represent facts, and then sometimes we can use them to justify our thoughts or our actions, and this can be trouble if our emotions get us to ignore the facts. The second goal of decreasing the frequency of unwanted emotions or changing your unwanted emotions Checking the facts is one of those important skills in how to do that. So I am going to go over that in a little bit. But that's why emotions are so important. Motivating us for action, communicating and influencing others, and then communicating to ourselves. And the more we can be in control of them, the more empowered that we can feel over ourselves and choosing how we want to respond in a situation that feels best for us. Now, there are some things that make it hard to regulate our emotions, one of those being biology. Biological factors can make emotion regulation hard. If you've got other physical symptoms going on, you can't ignore that. And of course, lack of skill. What you don't know is, well, first of all, not your fault. We should have been taught most of these things as young children. And for most of us, our parents and teachers didn't teach us these skills, so we were left to our own devices, and that's okay. That's why we provide this mindfulness hub to hopefully help us learn these skills, because it really is never too late. Something else that makes it hard to regulate your emotions, reinforcement of emotional behavior, so your environment can reinforce you when you're highly emotional, as well as moodiness. Your current mood controls what you do instead of your wise mind. And depending on our mood, we don't always want to put time and effort to regulate our emotions. Even if we know, I should do this, I need to do this, oftentimes our mood can affect that. Emotional overload, high emotional arousal can also affect whether you have the emotional energy to regulate your emotions. And then, of course, there's myths or mistaken beliefs about emotions can get in the way of your ability to regulate emotions. A couple of those being that emotions are bad or weak. They can lead us just to avoid them and do things that are not healthy for us or in our best interest, solely to avoid an emotion that is probably perfectly healthy. Another myth is that extreme emotions are necessary or they're a part of who you are, can also keep us from trying to regulate our emotions. They're really not. They're definitely not necessary, even if they have been a part of you for your whole life. It doesn't have to be that way. It is never too late to learn how to regulate your emotions. It is always, always helpful, always in your best interest to be in control of that, of yourself, of your mind, and thus of your body. So as part of July's package of meditations, I'm including some meditations that help you regulate anger, sadness, and disgust. So I figured I would go over those three specific emotions and kind of give you some prompts to go off of when you're doing those meditations. The idea is to channel those emotions so that you are familiar with them, what they feel like in your body, and how, make it easier for you to identify in the future when they do arise in real time. So we'll start off with anger. Some ways to describe anger can be agitation, bitterness, hostility, indignation, or outrage. Some prompting events for feeling anger could be having an important goal blocked, you or someone you care about being attacked or threatened, or not having things turn out as expected. Some interpretations of the events that prompted the feelings could be believing that you've been treated unfairly, believing that important goals are being stopped, believing that things should be different than they are, thinking you're right or judging that the situation is illegitimate or wrong, or ruminating about the event that set off the anger in the first place. Now, some biological changes and experiences of anger: muscles tightening, teeth clenching, hands clenching, feeling flushed or hot, sweating, being unable to stop tears. That's usually one of my go-tos. Wanting to hit something, bang the wall, throw something. Sometimes wanting to hurt yourself or someone else. What are some expressions and actions of anger? Well, physically, verbally attacking, aggressively threatening gestures, throwing things, walking out, using loud tones, criticizing, complaining, all the things, Those after effects of anger could be a narrowing of attention, attending only to the situation that's making you angry, ruminating about the situation that's making you angry or about situations in the past. Sometimes even depersonalization or dissociative experiences can take place. Oh, it is not fun or pleasant, no. So definitely be ready, be in a safe place when you're doing those meditations, when you're channeling those feelings and emotions. But by the end, you will feel more empowered. Moving on to disgust. Some synonyms for disgust: contempt, dislike, distaste, repulsion, feeling repulsed by something, or resentment even. Some prompting events for feeling disgust could be anything where your senses are triggered in an unpleasant way. We'll just say that. I don't want to give you too specific examples, but anything where any of your senses, where you see, taste, smell, hear, observe something, really gross, we'll just say, that can definitely prompt the feeling of disgust. Or being forced to watch something that violates your values, your wise mind values. Now, some interpretations of the events could be believing that you are swallowing something toxic, that you're being contaminated, that your own body parts are ugly. And, this again comes into play where you feel like you're violating your own morals and values and that you're maybe doing something wrong, judging someone's body or your own as extremely ugly. Extreme disapproval of yourself or your own feelings, thoughts, or behaviors. Biological changes and experiences of disgust could be feeling of nausea, having a lump in your throat, aversion to eating or drinking, urge to take a shower, run away, feeling contaminated, dirty, unclean, or even fainting. Some expressions and actions can be actually vomiting, closing your eyes, looking away, scrubbing, showering, changing your clothes, actually avoiding eating or drinking, physically attacking something out of disgust, using obscenities, cursing, or speaking in a sarcastic tone, or smirking. Very similar after effects of disgust as anger, narrowing your attention, ruminating about the situation that made you feel disgusted, maybe even becoming hypersensitive to dirt. But again, the more you become comfortable with those and familiar with those emotions and feelings and sensations, the more you'll be able to control them and manage them, and the more empowered you will feel. Now finally, sadness. Some synonyms could be grief, despair, dismay, insecurity, gloom, unhappiness, depression. Some prompting events could be death or loss of someone close to you, things not being what you expected, being separated from someone that you care for, being rejected or excluded, reading or hearing about other people's problems or troubles, being alone, feeling isolated. Some interpretations of the events could be believing that the separation from someone will last for a long time or never end, believing that you will not get what you need in life, seeing things as hopeless, believing that you're worthless. Some biological changes that could take place: feeling tired, run down, low in energy, feeling lethargic, wanting to stay in bed all day, that feeling of emptiness, feeling as if you can't stop crying or ever start crying, difficulty swallowing, breathlessness, or dizziness. Some actions and expressions of sadness: avoiding, making slow, shuffling movements, withdrawing from social contact, avoiding activities that used to bring pleasure, eyes drooping, frowning, not smiling, crying a lot. And similar after effects: ruminating about the sad event, not being able to remember happy things, feeling irritable or grouchy, blaming or criticizing yourself, or even insomnia. And again, I know meditating on these events or emotions is not pleasant, but I can't stress enough how important it is to feel in control of your emotions and building up that resiliency. So one of the regulation skills that I often use with my clients is check the facts. I feel like it's really useful to change your emotional thoughts and interpretations of an event Because a lot of times an event can happen and our thoughts about it can affect our emotions about it can affect our thoughts, and we can just be in this big ball of uncomfortability that we don't know how to get out of. So what can you do? Well, step one, you can ask, what is the emotion that I want to change? Was it anger, sadness, disgust, something else? What is the event prompting my emotion? Was it having an important goal blocked? Was it seeing something that really takes you out of your comfort zone? Was it losing somebody close to you? What are my interpretations, thoughts, and assumptions about the event? Are you now judging yourself or somebody else? Am I assuming a threat? If you are, label the threat. Assess the probability that the threatening event will occur. Think of as many other possible outcomes as you can. Ask, what's the catastrophe? Imagine the catastrophe really occurring. Imagine coping well with a catastrophe through problem solving, coping ahead, radical acceptance. Ask, does my emotion or its intensity fit the actual facts? So if you're experiencing anger, if you have an important goal that is blocked, you or someone you care about is attacked, those are examples where it could fit the facts. If that did not happen, then it might not be fitting the facts. If you're experiencing disgust, then maybe something that you are in contact with could poison or contaminate you. Someone you deeply dislike is touching you. Someone around you or a group whose behavior or thinking could seriously damage others or harmfully influence you is around. Those are examples of emotions that it fits the facts. And then, of course, sadness. You've lost someone or something permanently. If your emotion does fit the facts, then it is so important to validate yourself in that moment. If it doesn't, well, then we can move on to another skill to try to help us regulate, reduce the intensity, and thus change the emotional reaction. So checking out whether your emotional reaction fits the facts and then changing your beliefs and assumptions to fit the facts. It can help you change your emotional reactions to situations. Next month, I'll go over opposite action. And then finally, in September, we'll talk about problem solving. So that wraps up our first lesson on emotion regulation. Enjoy the corresponding meditations along with them. And as always, stay kind to yourself.